Hello there, a very warm good evening to you, and welcome to our conversation tonight on African artists and spaces in the midst of a global pandemic. Before we start though, I'd like to apologize for the late start. We had a technical challenge, a very rare Ghanaian moment. It doesn't happen all the time, you know. But we're really sorry, and we thank you all for connecting with us from wherever you're connecting from. Before we start, however, I'd like to announce a few things as housekeeping. And we'd like for you to join us live if you haven't done so already. Share our social media channels with all your friends and ask them to join this conversation. We're live across Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Kunyehia Prize. Please share and then let your friends join us. I'd also encourage you to share all your comments and feedback with us. We will take them after the conversation. And also to our online audience, we would entreat all of you to mute your microphones so that we don't get any feedback here. We have already done so here, but just in case you're feeding through, we'll be glad if you muted your microphones for us. And for my internal audience, I have a few here. If your microphones are, your phones are on, please do well to turn them off or put them on silent, not on vibration, because those two would interfere with us technically. I'd like to acknowledge a few people who are joining us here. Online, we have a huge audience. I'll acknowledge you soon. Before then, though, I'd like to acknowledge those of us who are joining us in-house. We have Ms. Sasha Okor, who is trustee of KTCA Board of Trustees. We'd like to appreciate you very much for all the hard work that you do and your dedication to the trust. We also acknowledge Carl Hooper, who is coordinator for the trust. Also, Ese Dabla Atipo, who is an independent curator for the KTC. And then, last but not least, Ifia also Efriye, also of KTC. Let me also acknowledge all our online audience. And you're made up of our exhibitors, cultural officers of the embassies in Ghana, Accra-based European cultural centers, Kunyehia Prize shortlisted artists, visual artists below 40 years old. When I saw this, I was intrigued. That's supposed to say that what? Those of us who are above 40, we clocked off? No, we haven't. But hey, we acknowledge all of you. Patrons of KTC dotted across the globe. And I'm also aware that UNESCO's Real Art, which sheds light on far-reaching impact of COVID-19 on the cultural sector, are also plugged in. Thank you for your interest, and we look forward to collaborating with you very, very soon and on huge projects. So once again, hello to you all, our global audience. Glad you could join us, and a big, warm akwaba to you all. So let's begin. At the turn of 2020, most of us had big plans, huge dreams. You know, we had nest ambitions to start new projects, have new collaborations, grow our network, and do wonderful things. Little did we know that COVID-19 was coming to ravage our world and then shut everything down. The world had something new, lockdown for the first time, and Ghana was not spared. We went into 4 weeks of lockdown, and it affected everything, and also, especially people in the arts sector. We've moved on from then, 2021. Vaccines have been developed the world over now. In Europe, most people have taken their first shot. Africa is still waiting to take our shots, by the way. And then still questions remain. What would our lives be, after COVID? Is COVID going anytime soon? What would it mean for the artists? How are we all going to live within this period? And what would the artists actually have to do? We want to think of new and innovative ways of interacting with people. That is the question that we are asking. And tonight, I have been joined by two astute members of the arts and creative sector to dissect and dialogue on this special topic. First, we introduce. Hello, Will.
Hey, Marian. finally, we start.
Finally.
Yeah, I'm Will Senyo, and I lead a company called Impact Hub Accra, part of a global network of supporters of creators across a large spectrum in 100 cities across the world. Here in Accra, our mission is primarily focused on working with 3 core communities that we consider the highlight of a new Ghanaian generation, which is tech entrepreneurs, social activists, and creatives. And we think those 3 at the nexus, working together, collaborating together, can create magical things. And our work is to enable them through a mix of access to spaces, capital, and global resources.
Thank you very much, Will. Next is the lady. Her name is Tjasa Rener. And she's an artist.
Hello, hi. Yes, so my name is Tjasa. I'm based in Ghana for about 10 years now. All the time very strongly and actively engaged in the art scene. So I'm an visual artist, painter, printmaker, an art educator, and I offer my personal space, so studio, and share them with other artists in need of space to show their work.
Fantastic. Joseph Awuah-Darko is our 3rd panelist, but he's not in-house, he's online. So, welcome. This event is brought to you by the European to Ghana and organized here Trust for Contemporary Arts. My name is Marian Touré. I am a development communicator, gender activist, and media specialist. I will be your moderator for tonight. African artists and spaces in the midst of a global pandemic. Emergence of spaces, physical or virtual, that allow artists to remain active, especially in the difficult context of COVID-19. That is our discussion for tonight. 2020 has been a year of 2 halves for me. Mentally, emotionally, financially, physically, and all other leads that you can add to it. So if you ask me during, I'll probably say going on. So for the 2 of you, how are you doing? Are you doing? How do the lady, Tjasa?
Well, I'm doing quite well. Yeah. I went through a lot of changes. One of it was perceiving early 2020 my art career fully for the very first time since I finished university in fine art back in Slovenia. So that was a big change, right, to decide to go in that way. And of course, not knowing that the COVID will come, and of course reflecting on how I overcome and how I engage with my community, art community in Ghana, and my art community back in my country. I realized that it's not only me having own challenges with that time, and that's where it sparked the idea, not the idea, but that really pushed me to open my space for other artists as well. So, which I think was like a good thing in many ways that for me to first step back, reflect, see more clearly what will be my next step, and with that also having a chance of develop my space to be in use for others as well. So maybe, as I'm saying, as I'm thinking that if there would be no COVID, maybe my open house studio would never really happen, or not in that specter as it is now. So,
Quite a revelation. I'm sure we'll explore that later. Will, how you doing?
If anyone told me I'll be saying this in 2021, I would have said nah. But I'm having the time of my life right now. 2021 has zigzagged on me in ways I didn't expect. And it's also showed my true supporters in a lot of ways. People that are coming through above and beyond. So on multiple levels, there's positives to this that make it a bit flippant to say it, especially because there's death, actual people dying and all of that. But on a personal level, it's given an opportunity to go into directions out of sheer pragmatism that have ended up being a revelation in ways. And I'll be happy to share more of that. But it's definitely also curtailed a few things. But in one specific way, which is that for the first time in my adult life, the last, say, 8 years, I've been grounded. And the whole hopping around the world thing, if you look back, was a bit pointless in some ways. It becomes just a lifestyle thing that you get hooked into, and the return is not necessarily always that great. But being grounded at home and being rooted in a certain way and contributing in a very direct way to everything on a daily basis has its positives. So that for me has been the highlight of this whole transition to a period in the middle of the crisis. Yeah.
So I guess we all agree that it hasn't been all negative.
Definitely not.
Fantastic. But Tjasa, I think I want to come to you next. As a creator, you think through things before you create. You dream them, and then you translate them on canvas for those of us who enjoy art to enjoy. How has COVID affected you mentally, and how has it challenged your creative process, especially when it comes to thinking about what to do?
So, as I said before, it allowed me to, when I create as an artist, I am very open to a lot of other things. So I think I cannot live with one thing only. So I always do 2, 3, 4 things at the same time. So, and they all go, hand by hand. But for me, this time was really of trying to plan as being new into full-time art. How do I want to also not anymore in my 20s as I was when I finished university? So maybe the for me is also right, because I'm seeing those things with maybe a different perspective and with maybe a bit wiser as I was 10 years ago. So I usually, yes, I'm inspired. Since I live in Ghana, that's strongly reflecting in my artworks as well. And for me is a big attention that I put in my artworks is the process. So materials I use and how more I can complicate technically my artworks to get a certain result. So I put my paintings on hold for almost 6 months. Why? Is because I start to really strongly work on my open house studio that we will talk later a bit more about. And that I'm seeing that is taking a lot of my time and my space. Right now I'm at the point where I'm trying to learn and trying to get the balance between my artwork, my personal life, which is my personal life very strongly connected to my and my art practice, but also trying to kind of keep up with an open house studio. Yeah, that's where I'm right now.
Would you say you are mentally in a very sound? Well, going through COVID and everything, are you mentally in a sound place to create? Did it affect your?
I think that's one of the specter of why also I put my my art practice on a bit of a hold. Of course, for me, it's very important that I show up every day in my studio, even if I only work on a small sketch or small cutouts or sometimes just clean up a space. It's good enough for me at least to connect with my environment, working environment. But yes, maybe I didn't have the right, maybe I wasn't connected to myself in that way to be able to start a larger works or deeper works. Yes.
Thank you for those insights. Will, your events are not so much creative or creating. Yours are more about creating the space for people to really have their conversations and then network. How has the pandemic impacted on this, if it has at all?
Yeah. So just to give you some for those watching, just some context. So the Impact Hub, as I said, is primarily focused on these three core communities: tech entrepreneurs, social activists and impact entrepreneurs, and creatives. And that spectrum, we've been very focused on the first two for reasons of pragmatism and where capital flows, right? And the goal has always been to be able to subsidize our work with creatives, because it takes a longer journey to sometimes get to profitability when you're dealing with early stage creative communities. But in 2018, we through the German government tried to elevate that work by organizing one of the first kind of cross engagements called Republica, which is this global festival that puts creatives at the center of it and everything connects to them. So that was the beginning of our central focus on creatives. Following that, the next big thing was supposed to be our creative focus space, because we have 4 different buildings in one neighborhood. We've been trying to build up to 20 spaces, live, work, play spaces in a half a square kilometer area in the heart of the city of Suakwaje. So we had just raised our last round of capital from our investors to build a more centrally kind of creative focus space. So it was multimedia spaces, podcast rooms, galleries, studios, all of that. So that was one part of it. The second part of it was launching a creative fund called Culture Forward, which was supposed to be making bets on the future of pop culture in Africa, essentially finding those that will shape African art over the next decade and making early bets in them by using one thing that we find very important. When it comes to tech and social impact, there's a very formulaic process from getting from idea to creation and making money off of it. The template is global, everyone follows it. If you're a kid in Nairobi, you know that when I have an idea, I start an MVP, then I get an angel investor, then I go to market and raise a pre-seed, then I raise a seed round, then I raise Series A. Everyone follows the same template. If you're a creative in the heart of the city of Accra, you don't have that formula. You go by your own gut and you follow certain things. Ours is that we've mastered the art of creating narratives that can lead to capital to follow this formula. How can we transition the creative community to something of that sort, a playbook of sorts that can create a pathway from talent to market for purposes of this conversation? How can you translate your creative energy and expression into something profitable over time? And that is where our focus was going to be. So partnering on the Culture Forward side, the partnership was with Artist Manifest as the creative lead on that, and us as the business lead on raising capital. And then together finding ways to create a pipeline of artists across the spectrum, from visual artists to recording artists, all through, and essentially making bets the same way we make bets in early stage tech ideas and social impact ideas. And that was scheduled primarily for reasons of spacing, because while we had just finished the last building, but obviously the launch events couldn't happen the way we wanted it. The gallery was not going to be open the way we wanted it. And so we had to rethink how a lot of these things happen. And so that puts us in a certain place, as I said, that we are experimenting in ways that it's also still exciting. Not the same way we would have executed, but still bringing the value that we wanted to bring.
Technology is the new normal.
There you go.
But I actually wanted to ask, we are in a different phase now in the restriction imposition here in Ghana. How are you guys handling it? Because I remember first phase was very strict. This is more relaxed. Nonetheless, it is still, in force. How are you, the two of you, coping in terms of managing with the new restrictions?
So I, as an artist, uh, I'm mainly alone in my studio. So with this, I don't have a problem, yeah? So I spend most of the day on my own. With an open house studio, so that's in a community space that I open up in my storage. That was my storage at first for my art supply and art material, that I cleaned it up in the time of pandemic, and in the time of just time of lockdown in Ghana, and host the first exhibition with the Beyond Collective, which is a collective in Accra. First exhibition early in November. So the last show we had was the end of January that I was hosting, and we did not expect so many people. And when I was seeing full street, another thing of my art studio and an open house studio is that is on the dusty road in Jowulo, so it's actually very open for truly everyone, and that's really where my vision is, having the art space being part of a community, part of the local, like on the open street, and also providing at the same time a platform for young artists to have a place to show their work. So with this January exhibition, we occupied the entire street, yeah. So that's where a bit of my fear came, that, oh wow, what about this place would be a reason for some people to get the COVID. So I postponed a February event, and hopefully we will host a March one a bit slower, maybe open the exhibition for a longer period, but with a limited amount of people. Yeah.
I'm ashamed to say this, but the 5 people on my team got COVID between September and January. 3 obviously because they were in the office, and 2 because the 2 others because they partied too hard, maybe over the January holiday season.
Okay.
So that says something. We obviously didn't do some things right. For 3 people in a team of, at the time, just 15 people to get COVID, that says a lot about our lax nature. Fast forward to now. We're a little more stricter with our protocols. We are still getting people into spaces, trying to hold events, but doing it in a way that brings some responsibility across the board for all. My personal philosophy at this point is that we can't allow this thing to hold us to ransom, and that's just my view. That, like everything else, we have to navigate it and also take responsibility, not force anyone to do anything they are uncomfortable with, but also allow free expression as much as possible, following rules if you have to. So for creatives, I still think that and I'm glad that events are still happening. We, like this setup, I was wondering if 3 of us would be comfortable to be here, even if we were separated. It's still an enclosed space. So it's still a very kind of, you take a risk, and you look around, you ask yourself, I'm young, I'm healthy, whatever. You move forward and do the best you can. So on our side, we'll own up to not being the best in the early days because we're still not sure what best practices are. But right now, mine is charge forward, and this doesn't represent the views of the trust. This is just my view that, in fact, if there is a time to create, it's now. We are in some of the darkest times in our history. This is the time for artists to step up and create things that will uplift our soul. And we can't allow this to essentially derail our joy and moments of levity that we all need. And if there's anything, I'm not saying artists are only supposed to lead us to levity, but those that are moved to lead us to levity should create and create abundantly. And we should also be energetic enough to engage it in this time, in spaces, taking precautions, but we should create.
Okay, so you said something, spaces. COVID-19 has changed our idea of space.
Sure.
So I mean, how are you adapting to digital virtual space to carry on with your work? Have you done so? Are you doing so? Is it working? What are your challenges, if any?
So I'm of two minds of this, right? A big part, nearly 45% of our entire business model is tied around raising debt to build spaces for these three communities that I've talked about. Obviously, that is out the window in some ways, at least in the interim. But then it's also led me in terms of thinking through the future to be excited about the possibilities of creating new forms of spaces. So in 2 weeks, we're about to start renovating one of our buildings. I'm literally can't sleep out of excitement because of the directions it could go, right? In fact, it gives impetus for experimentation in ways that you can defend now. In the past, some experimentation will be like overdoing it, but now you can use the health thing as the reason for experimenting and doing things fairly differently. So on our side, yes, the business model has taken a hit primarily because you can't have large numbers. And our social capital comes from numbers, essentially. The convener of different forms of people, artists being a central part of it, and we can't convene them in numbers because, yes, people talk about virtual and all of that, and bless their hearts, I think virtual is going to be good, but there's nothing, in my view, than the human spirit connected in spaces. And it will always, like if you can have an event with 1,000 people online, it won't be the same as 1,000 people in a room. They're never the same. And my cachet as a convener and as a connector is to tap into that energy to get people excited to sign checks for these kinds of people. And I can't do that in this kind of formula as it stands. So you have to get creative. But that's just accepting that we are handicapped right now in some ways, and just working around it. My thing is to make spaces cool again and safe enough for people to be willing to take risks to engage with the works of creatives. That's my goal. So our podcast room, we are doing all forms of experimentation to make sure that if you were to tape a session in our podcast room, you don't feel like you are entering a COVID den. That you feel like all precautions have been taken and you can enter. You are coming to our event spaces. When we open our gallery, everything you do, you should feel like this is probably even safer at this point than my room. That is so that's where the excitement is, that we can create things that will excite people again and get them comfortable enough to come out. Hopefully we succeed.
Tjasa, how are you using digital technology? Have you used it? Are you going online, or you're still traditionally doing things the same old way?
So I am very bad with technology, very bad with social media. I do have an Instagram, for instance, and when my much younger sister opened an Instagram for me, I abandoned Facebook because I was like, I cannot handle two at one time. So that was one thing that I'm bad with that. Like promote, even with my own work, I'm bad with promoting it. But I did open an Instagram account for an open house studio, which was back in late in November, after the first more serious event we have hosted. And now it's I try to post things once in a while. I try to engage not only what we are doing at Open House Studio, but also what is going on around Ghana and Accra particularly, but also around Ghana. So but I'm quite bad with that. And another thing is also that I'm alone. Yeah, I'm alone in that. So I'm like trying to learn, trying to go with the flow. How
So I'm sure you'll get there sometime. Who knows? I can help you do that. So let's come to the resource matter. We all need money. Money. I can't stress it enough, especially for creatives. How are you raising funds to continue with your work? It is basically have either come to a halt or they don't exist anymore, do they? But how are you raising funds to continue?
That's a very interesting question. We'll be having probably a much more to say about that. So I used to be a teacher in one of the international school in Accra. I resigned it just before the first case of COVID in Ghana, so early 2020. And I don't feel sorry for that decision. I think I took the right decision. But renting my studio spaces, there are 3 in a row. So the last one is now an open house studio. I found it from the little savings I had. So I invested into renovation and into rent. Yes, it's a questionable if I will be able to keep it up. If nothing else, I said, okay, it was at least an experiment. I give opportunity to at least 20 artists so far to go through that period, have an experience with the first show ever, sell some works and earn some money, put their name out there, and that's already part of my mission was already fulfilled with that. But of course, my wish is to keep on going. And what way I have to ask people like Will.
I'm sure Will can help.
Yeah, right. So there are two responses to the question of money right now, at least for creators. On the one hand, there's never been a better time to be a creative from this side of the world, right? The amount of eyeballs on African art, African creative expression of any kind, is at its highest point. Obviously, it's going to, from here on out, it's going to be, multiple folds of growth. So on that front, the interest in what is coming out of here is not going to die down because of COVID. If anything, there's more consumption now because people's attention span is actually better today. They are not on the move in ways that they used to be. So in terms of consumption or the kind of taking in of our work, of when I say our work, the collective African art community is at a point that it's actually really, I'll say, nearly impossible for people to talk about not having enough interest, right? So that is not a problem in a wider sense. So the question is, do we have resources to create at a quality that will maintain the interest as it is now? So that becomes the tricky one. So as an elite group of African artists are thriving in ways that they never imagined, right? Because there's a concentration of focus on them and all the resources are going to them. If you look at recording artists on the continent and how well they are doing in terms of the global platforms they are now able to engage on, visual artists, the same. It's spectacular. So we can't be complaining around that on that one. The other one, I think the bigger question is the generation that is emerging. They were just about to ride off this wave to come in and take advantage of the opportunity and all of that. And then all of a sudden, things dry up. So the top 1% of artists would do fine. In fact, they would thrive and do great. I think the trickiest part of it now is those that were on the verge of taking advantage of this opportunity, younger artists in highly experimental phases of their practice, and then all of a sudden can't get access to the resources they need. That said, we are also seeing, and this is just me being part of some things. For example, I was recently part of the global jury that selected 8 artistic projects to give them £500,000 in support post-COVID. And we selected 8 projects across Africa. There's a ton of those happening right now. Everyone understands that artists are hurting than most classes in us because of how limiting this becomes for them, the younger ones and the less established ones. So there's also pockets of initiatives across Africa specifically supporting artists. Whether it's enough is another question. And institutions like the British Council and all the cultural agencies are doing some good work. What I think becomes a bigger question around resources, whether we can divert resources from other places to artists. So now artists are essentially competing for the same amount of resources, but are not able to promise the same kind of return. So if there's an angel who possibly has disposable income and typically will buy a piece of artwork and then also sign a 15K check for startups, question is, are they doing it the same way now, or are they doing more of the other, more than the other? So that I don't have necessarily insight into. I have a few anecdotal stories from friends, but not enough. Where I think the biggest opportunity is now is global development dollars, reallocating global development dollars, and that's where we come in, right? So making a case for the entire creative community as a central piece of the economic frame that we exist in right now. It's not a peripheral thing anymore. This is actually, we are dependent on creatives in so many ways than we like to admit. If you look at the positive narratives coming out of Africa, hands down, they lead that. So beyond the fact that the creatives or artists in any form create things that we can be proud of locally, it's now gone past that. It's now, we actually need them to create a positive narratives that bring investment dollars here. Because you'll be surprised that a night in Berlin with an African artist is more likely to convert a high net worth individual's interest in Africa in general than me pitching 10 startups to them. So the human brain works in funny ways. Things that make people feel good, give them reflection, and artists are really central to that. So to that point, I'm saying that the global development dollars, essentially the kind of the way they flow now needs to be readjusted, and that's where people like us come in, making a case for supporting more of the creative economy, more than we've ever done, because it's now become a central part of what it means to have an African economy. It's not a peripheral. We just don't dance and go. It's really important. The amount of royalty monies that come here and all of these are actually, there's dollar values to all of these things. So we want to make that case to as many of these international development partners as possible to change the thinking around how to allocate resources and be able to divert more risk-free capital to creatives to do more.
And that is the place where I get something going in my head right now. How about the collaboration with the Kunyahia Trust?
Mm-hmm.
When you get the money, you roll that just a little bit.
We've tested things in the early days with Ifia between us, the trust and the Dutch government gave the top 10 from like 2016 from the prize a full week to show their work and try to connect them to resources. We've been experimenting with a lot of things and never actually really gone full-blown kind of projects with some of these partners. But this is the time to do it. So I agree.
So why not?
Yeah.
Let's do it. Tjasa, what do you say?
I think that we are absolutely clear that we have a lot of talents in Africa, in Ghana as well. Now, I think where I see the problem is where how to nurture them and how to make them a solid base and support them, make it sustainable places for them where they can constantly feel safe and have a constant income to be able to not worry and produce. So, and that's where we have to, I think, work. That's where we are still kind of lost, or lack of spaces and places like that, or organizations like that. Yeah.
Next question. How are you remaining relevant as an artist within this period? What are you doing?
Oh, okay. So for me, I set myself a certain routines that I try to follow them up daily. Sometimes I need to push myself a bit, which means that much more reading that I used to. I never like. I think I never carved the space for and time for that. That's my a must now. A sport. Sport is important. Just to keep your brain fresh. Regular food, which I like to skip it before very often. Oh, I had a lunch. I don't
That
need
is
nothing else.
inspiration.
And yeah, that those are very important thing. And I think is some routine that even if the day feel empty, kind of that you have a certain things that you have done and you already feel good about your day and about yourself because you know that I did that, and then I think that's how I approach my days. Yeah.
I was just thinking, I think we broached that subject a little bit about COVID not being all doom and gloom, and there are some really great things that COVID has brought. I mean, I can, for example, say in the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, people are making lots and lots of money, just even, manufacturing sanitizers and also nose masks. So for you, what would be the key things that COVID has brought that perhaps, I don't want to sound blasphemous, but to say that if COVID hadn't happened, this thing wouldn't have happened for me, and thank God for COVID. Something like that. What would that thing be for you?
I'm not sure I would say thank God for COVID. In some personal ways, it also devastated certain parts of my life and turned it upside down. But like I said, it's also been fairly good. But I think relevant to this conversation, one thing I can say I'm happy for is that in the series of the way we saw us working with the creative community and how we felt we could connect it back to our other communities, we were very much driven by, I don't know if you know the South by Southwest Festival. So South by Southwest is probably one of the biggest festivals in the world. It's interactive media meets tech, essentially. And so just the future of everything, virtual, immersive experiences, film, music, all of it. It's just like happens in the middle of Austin, takes over the city for a week, spectacular experience. We've had one of those in mind for ages, right? Something that truly brings all that is great about our city, because there is a lot that is great about our city, and kind of putting it in one spot, and collectively owning it as a city, and we tested that with a location thing at Republica, and just to see the appetite of our city and how collaborative people were going to be, and then we were kind of vindicated that, guys, like over 2,000 people, 83 countries, like amazing. So the next point was, do a citywide thing and like just explode. Obviously, it was 2020. Some funding had been lined up. Interest was, everyone was keen to make it happen, and then this thing kind of just blows that. And so obviously, we can't execute something like this in the foreseeable future. For at least another year, we'll have to shelve this. So 2 years straight of shelving this thing. What does it mean? Does it mean that we wait from now to when we can execute? Or can we begin to invest in create and focusing on the communities that will eventually lead to a successful thing? And so that is where we decided to focus on the podcasting and knowledge sharing and connection part of this. So launching a series of things that will bring people, specifically in their art game, something called paid forward, right? The thing is, people that have managed to crack through this on their own, using their own kind of just hack to get to the top, need to find a way to pay it forward. part of the problem with this, essentially, the whole art community, in my view, and this is lessons we learn on the tech side, is that there's not enough connection from the past to the current. So people are making the same mistakes artists made a decade ago. It shouldn't happen. In the tech game, when you crack something, it becomes a playbook. You just follow it. We need to see more of that in the art game. So for me, one thing I would say is that this thing gives us pause, reflection, and in that pause, we then learn the small things that need to probably happen before the explosions that we want to happen. And that is where what I will say I'm thankful for, that we get to be a part of this curation of learning and connection, that if we had our way, we wouldn't focus too much on. We'll just go straight to, and maybe the outcome may not lead to where we want it to be. So that part, I'm grateful for, that we can step back, learn, connect, and then bring learning from an old guard to a new generation, and hopefully they don't make the same mistake and their trajectory is much better, smoother.
So before I go to Tjasa, if you're just joining us, you've missed quite a lot of our discussion. But I'd like to reiterate the topic that we are discussing today: African artists and spaces in the midst of a global pandemic. Emergence of spaces, physical or virtual, that allow artists to remain active, especially in the difficult context of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll open the floor soon to take your questions, which I hope would have been compiled by now. Then I can take them and give them to my panelists to answer them for you. So Tjasa, the floor is yours, please. Follow up if there's anything that has been a positive for you during this pandemic. What would it be?
Oh, yeah. So, yep. As I said, like some early on in the conversation, that probably an open house would not happen in that form if there would not be a COVID. And as seeing my friends around me going through a certain problems, similar problems of an anxiety. Of course, a lot of us was great and maybe stronger than we used to before. But that sparked that of like, okay, I need to move it. I need to provide a platform for others for us to show. But at the same time, so that was a positive side of COVID. For me also, what I think, I love Accra as a city, is a very diverse, very dynamic. What I feel as an artist here, need to say also that I stayed, I live in Ghana almost for 10 years. Half of that time, this period I spent in a bush by the Lake Busumtwi, 2 hours south of Kumasi, so that's where I used to live. That time, not having an internet even. So for me, coming to Accra was, of course, like a new world. And that's where I really start to kind of live and start to engage. What I missed was a bit of more of engagement and a collaboration between the artists on their own. And that was another thing that in my studio, which I'm renting in Jewulu for past 4 years, that was the first thing I did when I rented that place. Was before, now I name it an open house studio. It was like open for the people to come in, talk about art, open my personal space to others. And that's where I think we have some work to do to connect more, collaborate more. Need places like that to help us do that on a...
So I'm glad that at least we brought all of you together to have this conversation, and also to connect and network, and also exchange ideas, and also, for the future. You have something to add to that, Will?
No, I was just saying that we don't do this enough. Our city is still siloed in ways that I find unacceptable. Like, I've known Tjasa's work for like a year now through a mutual friend, but there's no reason that in a small city like this, we've not collaborated or this. I just think there's way more that needs to happen. And when we talk about art here, it's about time we took it out of the periphery and kind of made it really central to life here. And I just feel like we can do more than is happening now. It's not just a cool factor thing anymore. This art in its current form can do way more for our city in terms of expressing a new ideal and what we stand for. And I think that requires it to be taken in some ways out of the cool kids club that it can be sometimes, and be truly central to like living in the city. Yeah.
I remember during the summer, I saw images on TV of artists in Europe actually having street art fairs. So, I mean, COVID has struck, nobody's going to the art gallery, nobody's doing music anymore. So it's just like what happens in the subway in New York and across Europe. People were moving their art studios outside. Are we seeing something like that coming up in Ghana soon, where we'll just have an open house one day, one weekend, advertised, come for an open art in a street corner somewhere in Osu or Cantonments or somewhere springing up?
I see a few art collectives doing interesting things like that. Whether they've become mainstream is another question. Again, it becomes the cool kids club thing. And so for those that are not in certain circles, it's become some sort of like some kids doing something. It's a niche thing. It can be way more than that. So yeah, to that point, yes, I see some interesting collaborative work, collectives doing some work. But knowing the Ghanaian, we actually do appreciate art. It's just the way it's presented sometimes makes it almost too exclusive to engage with. And so the broader Ghanaian mass is not sometimes able to engage with artistic expression by artists here the way they would like to. A very good example, Chalewote is a classic example of how the Ghanaian actually is energized about art. But because of how it's presented, it makes it very easy to engage with. And so the way the narratives are carved, the way it's communicated and all of that has a central part to play in how people engage with it. And I think that is the burden of the artist, to be able, at least if you are interested in wide engagement. Not every artist is interested in mass engagement, but for those that are, it's important to start refocusing the narratives they are creating and how they are communicating it. Because in a country like ours, with a bigger group of people in low income, if we want art to impact a wider group of people, we have to speak their language in some ways. And it's
very insightful conversations here. But I wanted to ask if you had any advice at all to give to someone who wanted to enter your space, a young girl or boy who wanted to enter arts and spaces. What would the advice be for them, especially within this period?
Okay, so I work in that direction as a previous question, and so for me, very important part of my space is that is not exclusive. So it's just a simple. It was meant to be a shop before, so when the people pass by, they feel they can be part of it. Is that from my banana seller across the street, or are these an artists on their own, or is there collectors as well? So who comes and see the shows? So so there is a lot of artists that lately reach out to me, a lot actually on a daily basis, that they would like to use the space. So for me, hosting events all the time is not possible, financially and not with the time. So let's say now in March, I am preparing a new exhibition with 3 Ghanaian artists. It's still on the very discussable phase, but very talented, very young boys who I want to I want to give them opportunity to show their work, though none of them have ever been in the gallery and none of them have ever show their work before, but they have a very interesting approach to their work. And so let's say that for me is reach out and trying to find a way. And for us, responsibility is to provide those spaces for them. I think it's important, and maybe not on that exclusive way, but it's the way that everybody feel like they can engage and be part of it. That's, I think, what is missing in Ghana. Let's say you go to a big city, galleries are every 500 meters. Yeah, they are part of the streets. They are inviting you to come in. That's what we miss in Ghana. We don't have that.
Marian, when you say advice, if there's something I've stopped doing, is offering anyone any advice. Life and its zigzag moves. But this is what I'll say. Any form of veering off the normal path, which is what art can be for most young Ghanaians. A veering off of what is expected of them. Very few people wake up thinking, I want my kid to be an artist. It's not a Ghanaian aspiration in a lot of ways. So anyone going on a journey like that is going against the grain in some ways. Now that journey is a really lonely journey in a lot of ways, especially out here. So real talk, this is any form of self-actualization that is going against the grain is going to be 2-3 times difficult than if you wanted to, if you play by the rules. So your talent will count for nothing if you don't have resilience and grit to kind of power through that loneliness and being odd from the early days. And this is something we all have to live with any form of self-actualization that is not normal. And I see this with artists all the time. This ebb and flow where give up, start again, give up, start again, because you can't power through with energy all the way to the end to see your talent actually shine. So for anyone going on any form of journey, like, depending on yourself to build something, that is inherent in the journey. And I hope that it's not lost on people to see that curve. Before you see Tjasa's work being spotlighted, there's a backstory of just mess and craziness to the point of the work getting that recognition. And I think if you don't internalize that, then you are in for some trouble. So anyone who is here feeling like they're the most talented person, talent alone would not count for much in an environment like ours. Great resilience would get you places.
Thank you so much, Senyo. So if you're just joining us, we're having a conversation that wraps up our 2 weeks of arts exhibition that took place at Alliance Française. It was entitled In Dialogue, and it was by the European Union delegation to Ghana, organized and curated by the Kunyehia Trust for Contemporary Arts. Today we are talking about African artists and spaces in the midst of a global pandemic, emergence of spaces, physical and virtual, that allow artists to remain active, especially in the difficult context of COVID-19 pandemic. Some of your questions come through. There's no name on some of them, but one person is asking, if COVID is here to stay, how does it affect the nature of art exhibitions or shows? For the two of you, I'm sure we deliberated a lot about this, but if the person just joined us, perhaps you want to provide some clarity for them on that.
So I have learned, I believe it can't stay this way. We will need to have to learn how to live with it, and say in my for a year they only had a few months of being really free. Most of my artist friends from a different art spectrum, they've been without a job for months. In a lockdown up till now. So, and we have I think that's really, we are pushing that limits. It can be we will either need to accept it and go against it and just let it as be part of our life and try to live as much as possible normal I honestly don't see another solution. Especially here in Ghana, as we are on the list, the last to receive the vaccine. So I don't know. I think we are doing quite well, especially from the point of still keeping up with the events, not completely closing down, neither bars, restaurants, neither gallery spaces and events. But it's obviously not the same as it was. So I don't know if that will be keep on going. How to deal with it? It's just probably trying to go. I don't know.
I'm an eternal optimist, so I'll say this phase will pass. The human evolution has these moments in it, and today we are more equipped than ever to kind of get over this bump and get back to our lives. What I know for sure, at least for our general thinking around spaces now, is that more open spaces, more outdoor spaces. So that's why I say it gets me excited, because then for the first time, we are having to use all the natural things around us to create an ambience that will be nearly as you were indoors, but comfortable enough and being outside. And so we have elements of the Ghanaian ecological just makeup that sometimes doesn't make outdoor experiences that great. Mosquitoes and humidity and all of these things. We've all been spot rotting years by being in AC rooms all across this city, and all of a sudden COVID says get out and breathe some air. So for once, artists will have to create and show their work in ways that reflect their responsibility and understanding that they can't endanger people. At the same time, they have to be able to live and eat and show their work. I think the solution is outdoor spaces. So our new spaces, we are trying to invest more in making our outdoor spaces interesting enough, but we also know the elements of the weather you are dealing with and all of these things. So how can you use more resilient material, at the same time be sustainable? So all these things is why I'm excited about these, about the possibility of space. So for me, it's not that I don't think spaces are in any way. I think it's a momentary blip. I think we will come back and we will engage each other in even much nicer setups, because once we've experienced what is possible by being forced to experiment, we'll likely never go back to all these AC rooms as often as we used to. We'll be forced to do cool things outside. If the rain will allow us, or the weather will
I was
allow
going
us.
to say something like that. Anyway, our next question comes from B. Arthur, and she says, any plans to support artists across Africa who are tempted to give up their careers because of issues they are facing with COVID?
It's to the trust, no?
Tale, you're also bringing some money in, so.
So as I said, I think my personal role right now, the clout we have, is that we are able to shape policy in where the direction money goes into at the highest level. And for good or for bad, right? The fact that we still can't have that conversation locally and we always have to look externally, it's a big problem. But it's the situation we have to live with. And we have accepted that the resources we need for experimentation rarely come from here. So to be Arthur's point, yes, our work is to try to shift attention from external partners that are investing in Ghana, who are primarily now focused on, say, job creation or anything, to look at the creative economy as an avenue for doing exactly that. And more allocating more development dollars to that. So if it was a question to me, I would say that is the meta level, that is our job. And then on the kind of granular level, letting small things take shape in a way that we can point back to and say, this, if you invest, this is the outcome you can get. So those are the things we can do. And the trust probably has more to do.
There's another question, and this is coming from Seth Kwanzaa in the US. How do we encourage young artists to make a vibrant, sustainable career in Africa, given most of them are told to become doctors and lawyers, especially now?
I think there's already a large switches happening. Like let's say I and Will were talking before the talk. We in let's say it's not very different between Ghana and my home country Slovenia, where the parents doesn't show a particular excitement or supports for their kids to be wanted to be an artist. They were always like, oh, they would of course like to hear their child being a teacher or a doctor, or like, because for them that means, oh, you are an artist is in some way still seen as not being a job or not being in work. And when I came to Ghana, I've been lucky. I have a quite open parents, but and let me do what I wanted to do. But when I came to Ghana, I faced that exact thing, also appealing to my artist friends from Ghana. So their parents not necessarily see them as working because they are an artist. Yeah. So that's an issue we have to work on, and I think the changes are already coming in Ghana through some strong names that artists that made a strong name in the art world, that it started to reflect in the younger generations that, oh, it's possible to live as an artist, and it's possible to make a big impact, maybe bigger that certain surgeon can have, like with producing an artwork. And I think we are coming there. I think we are actually going towards.
Seth is a friend, and I know why he's asking. But the response there is fairly straightforward. I use one name to answer that: Ibrahim Muhammad. Right? Ibrahim is an example of an artist who is globally renowned, is financially, in so many ways, better position than any of some of the professions you've talked about. So and there are people like him across the country. It's a testament to what's possible, right? So on the front of having models that debunk this nonsense that if you are not any of these other things, you can't, because parents' goal for their kids is always financial viability for what they choose. Most of the time, it's not about the prestige or anything. They don't want their kids to be poor. That's where a lot of this comes from. So if you can take away that fear and say that pursuing this thing doesn't necessarily mean a life of poverty, and that by the way you can do that is show models of people that have managed to crack global dominance and become financially viable, do things that are financially viable. But those same people also have a responsibility, and Ibrahim again answers that question. Doing things that connect both parents and communities to see the potential of what art can do. So something like what he's built in Tamale, of all places, the Savannah Center for Contemporary Art. SCCA is testament to what is possible when an artist defies all odds and builds something relevant. And then doesn't end there, pays it forward. And more artists need to pay it forward to make it interesting for other kids to be engaged. And so to set question, we just don't encourage kids to do it, but today's artists have a responsibility to live a certain life and show viability for their careers in ways that will encourage other young people to pursue it. And another shout that I need to do in that regard, make it a project called Attitude. Attitude is a collective that we've been supporting, essentially taking high school kids and immersing them in a week's program to show them all that's possible if they were to allow their creative energy to kind of come alive. And on that journey, see those that see creating as something that is a true calling for them. We need enough of these things rivaling the science and maths quiz stuff that we have in Ghana, because everything is about prestige. So if you are the science and maths quiz winner in Accra, it counts for something. What's the equivalent of that if you're in high school? To be able to find pride in it. And we need to create some of these things in ways that can create the pride that most parents just want to be proud of their kids. Forget everything else. They just want kids they can be proud of, that other people look at and say, you raised a good kid. And science and math and some of these things provide that because of the prestige we give them. So if we can elevate art to that same level, kids will be excited to pursue it, in my view. Yeah. And so projects like that definitely go to solve that problem, creating that prestige, and that excites kids to pursue it.
Fantastic. Wow. Time flies when you're having fun. I think I have one last question before we go. And this is actually directed at me, and it's by Mr. Felix Bigger. He says, Marian, can you elaborate on future activities with UNESCO? How can artists participate? Okay, I think I mentioned that in passing, and also introduced the Resilient Art program by UNESCO. It's actually a global movement which has been initiated to support artists, especially during the COVID-19. It comes like a pseudo. So we have TEDx, Houston TEDx this, and so you can have your own resilient art wherever you are. And the idea going forward is that the Kunye Here Trust would try and find some collaboration with going forward. I think the best thing would be to keep in tune on the Trust social media pages and the website to see how you can participate going forward. So if you're just joining us, you have missed, in fact, you've missed the whole juice from Tjasa and also from Will. We're talking about creatives, artists, and how they are creating in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of you have joined us on social media as well, and I was hoping to take some of your questions and contributions, but it appears that so far there's nothing. And so we may be wrapping up this conversation, but before we go, do you have any final words in terms from the art space and from the perspective also of the person who provides the space for the artist?
All I want to see is the city come alive more. I think there's way more we can do with the city of Accra as is, and knowing the creative energy that is bubbling here. I want to see more mainstream engagement that brings art to the center of our lives, in a way that I know for sure will elevate the Ghanaian lived experience. As it stands now, art has almost become, in some ways, or some form of art has almost become a 1%er thing. And it's so in several other demographics, several other parts of the world. But I think we have an opportunity to do something different, and to make art and all forms of it, that expression, central to the Ghanaian lived experience, because there's so much of it here, everywhere you turn, and I just want to see more of it.
More of it, okay. Before Tjasa speaks, I'm actually aware that if may want to chip in one or two things. Is he available? Tjasa wraps up. Yes, and so Joseph, if you can hear me, we have actually come to the concluding part of the discussion, but I am sure that you were plugged in and you heard everything we said. If you have any summary, please share it with us now.
No, yeah. First of all, I apologize for not being able to come physically. But I think I really did enjoy hearing.
Joseph, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello. But yeah, basically, I wanted to express that I really enjoyed the dialogue, and I really do think that essentially we are in very unprecedented times, and art does play a really crucial role as a sort of crucible of hope. And what really inspired me to start Noldor in the first place was the fact that I essentially came to Ghana from London on a repatriation flight and learned that artists within the locale did need infrastructural support. And so it's really been nice to hear the interaction between Will and Tjasa about ways in which they've also had to overcome and adapt to the situation. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to furthering the dialogue beyond this seminar. But yeah, that's what I have to contribute.
Fantastic, Joseph, and thank you so much for chipping in. And we're sorry if you felt left out throughout the process. When you're in-house and you're having the conversation, sometimes you lose track of some of the things that are happening out there. Tjasa, please go ahead.
So for me, I can just say that I am an excited of that I am. I no longer feel a foreigner in Ghana. That's first thing. Obviously, I'm not Ghanaian, but I feel part of the community, and I'm glad I chose Ghana as my home. And I always said, like, how many times in a life you have an opportunity to be a part of a big, large movement. And I think in the art-wise Ghana, it's a place where the things are cooking. And maybe that time of COVID and us being closed down and on our own, it's a more time to for some larger things to cook. And maybe they'll come out when will be the right time to come out, and I am absolutely excited to take an active part in it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Tjasa, thank you so much for coming. Will, thank you. We'll do this again sometime soon. Most definitely. So I guess before we go, my one takeout would be that if anything at all, this time is a time to continue to create. COVID-19 shouldn't stop us from creating. We should rather go out there and focus on giving our audience more to chew on, because we still have substance, especially here in Africa. I'd like to thank you all for joining us for today's event. We are grateful, so grateful to the European Union for their partnership with the Kunyehe Trust for Contemporary Art, and to our friends at UNESCO for your interest. And we look forward to many more fruitful collaborations in the future with you all. I guess we'll just give the EU a shout out, and also that they are contributing a lot to spaces for artists. My name is Marian Touré. All I can say is remember to make art, not war. Over and out. We'll catch up again soon.